Hannah and Jess, we got away. Now we're unpacking what they won't say. Behind temple walls and cover-ups. We're pouring tea in your coffee cups. It's the post-Mormon post-mortem. Digging up what they want forgotten. Trauma, truth, and crime, yeah, we're surviving. It's post-Mormon post-mortem.
Hello, Eternal Family. Welcome to Post-Mormon Postmortem, the podcast where we lovingly sift through the ashes of our former faith, one bizarre belief and repressed memory at a time. I'm your host, Jess.
And I'm your host, Hannah.
Welcome back to Post-Mormon Postmortem Foundations, our series for Never Mormons trying to understand Mormon culture. Last time we explored patriarchal blessings, the personal prophecies that assign you to biblical tribes and predict your future. Today, we're diving into mission culture, which is the 2-year experience that defines Mormon young adulthood and creates lifelong social hierarchy.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, everybody can recognize a Mormon missionary from a mile away, right? They are so distinctive the world over. But before we get into the mechanics of mission life, it helps to understand what the church thinks it's building. Missions aren't just service trips or like religious semesters abroad. When I taught undergrads, they would talk a lot about mission trips. Meaning 2 or 3 weeks in South America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
This is
totally
much
different.
more intense. This is essentially an 18 to 24 months, depending on whether you're a man or a woman, immersion program where young Mormons dedicate every waking hour to conversion. Serving a mission isn't technically mandatory, but culturally, there is a lot of pressure. So choosing not to serve does follow you around. I mean, I will just speak very anecdotally. My former husband didn't serve a mission, and my twin sister's former husband did. And the way that my parents thought and talked about them was illustrative of the wider narrative in the church about people who had been on missions and people who had not. So not mandatory, technically, culturally, almost. I will go as far as to say.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get into a little bit about the why that is a little bit later on.
100%. So missionaries get sent to wherever they get sent in the world through an application process in which you would list like any foreign languages that you speak, and some of it's highly practical. If you have health concerns, you might stay in your own country. So regardless, wherever you go, you live by this rigid timetable. Starts early in the morning with scripture study with your companion. There is proselyting, planning, obviously more study. I mean, it's 10 to 12-hour work days, 6 days a week, with 1 day off called P Day, your preparation day, for laundry and grocery shopping, emails, and like basic catching up with your human maintenance.
It's pretty strict. Yeah, the mission rules, they're contained in a handbook called Preach My Gospel and supplemented by mission-specific guidelines, like based on where you are. They govern every aspect of missionary life. Missionaries cannot listen to popular music, watch television. They're not supposed to use the internet for personal purposes. And technically, they're not supposed to engage in most recreational activities. They for sure can't date. They can't have romantic relationships. And they're not supposed to ever be alone with members of the opposite sex. So the schedule that Hannah described and all of these rules are designed to create like total focus on missionary work while eliminating any potential distractions or temptations. And missionaries are told that this sacrifice demonstrates their dedication to God and prepares them for lifelong service in the church. So this is an interesting thing. When my ex and I moved back to Utah, I hadn't really briefed him on on missionary culture and what was going on. and it was this truth that really tripped him up, is the mission experience is explicitly compared to military service, with missionaries referred to as soldiers in God's army. They're
Mm.
taught they're engaged in spiritual warfare against Satan for the souls of humanity. So you'll hear young men say, "Well, I served and I served," and I remember my ex coming home and saying, "God, I cannot believe how many like veterans I met today." And I was like, "Veterans? What do you? Huh?"
That's wild.
And then a little bit of exploration. He's like, "Oh, well, I just, we're talking, talking with patients, and it was, but I served, in Japan, and I thought that they
Wow.
had like done military service, but no,
Interesting.
it's yeah, a really weird kind of cultural
Didn't
thing
think about
that,
the linguistic parallels.
yeah, that'll trip you up. But so,
Mm.
as I mentioned, I'd like to kind of talk about how mission culture evolved into this really controlled system because it wasn't always this regimented. Now, the modern missionary program took shape in 1974 when Spencer W. Kimball became the church president and prophet. Before Kimball, missionary work existed, but it was not the defining experience that we've just described. When Kimball took over in 1974, there were only roughly 17,000 missionaries worldwide. And so he gives this landmark address declaring that every able, worthy young man should serve a mission. He framed it not as optional, but as a priesthood duty on par with paying tithing and attending church. So then within just a few years, missionary numbers jumped way up to like 25,000. And the church had to build this massive missionary training center in Provo, Utah, also called the MTC. You might hear folks refer to it that way. So they built that in 1978 specifically to process this huge volume of young men coming through. So essentially, what Kimball did was industrialize the mission system. Right? He standardized the experience, created intense cultural pressure, as Hannah said. And so looking back, before Kimball, not serving a mission was really unremarkable. People didn't think about it. But after Kimball, not serving became a mark of spiritual failure that followed young men for life. And one of the more distinctive aspects, I think we're going to talk about a lot of distinctive aspects, but one of the more distinctive aspects of mission culture is the companion system. So missionaries are never alone. They're always with their assigned companion 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They eat together, they sleep in the same room, they study together, they proselytize together. Really, the only thing they don't do together is go to the bathroom. And I mean, they're never alone. Like you literally cannot take a shit without your companion waiting somewhere nearby so that you can pair up
Mm.
immediately after.
It's like parenting a toddler,
It is.
right? They're like, "I just want 5 minutes. I wanna go to the store
Quit
by
sticking
myself."
your fingers under the door. I'm in here.
Right. "I'll
Uh,
be right out. Leave me be."
5 minutes. No, but so how do they get paired up? Well, companions, they're assigned by the mission president. And the pairings typically change every few months. You don't get to choose your companion, and you can't request a change unless there are like really serious problems. So you might be paired with someone you have nothing in common with, someone that you don't like, or someone whose habits drive you crazy. I think the best parallel is like picture being assigned a college roommate, except you can never leave the dorm room without this person, ever. Not for class, not for meals, not even to go cry in your car because you probably don't have a car. And this person, they might clip their toenails in bed. They might quote scripture at you during breakfast or have, personal hygiene habits that make you question God's plan for your life.
Mm.
And if you hate each other, you can't even passive aggressively avoid them. You
Right.
can't study at the library to get away. You can't take a long walk alone to cool off. You can't really even escape to the shower without your companion literally waiting outside the bathroom door for you. So there's no escape valve. There's no cooling off period, no space to process your feelings privately. It's just, it's you and Elder Toenail Clipper together forever. or at least until transfer day, which might be 6 weeks from now.
If that sounds like a total nightmare, then you might be an introvert. I mean,
Like
me,
me. Me.
I came from this big chaotic family, and many Mormons can
Mhm.
relate to that idea. And we all respond differently. And the need for space and our own, time to regenerate is necessary for all of us, no matter how we identify.
Mhm.
It would be hard enough to be 24/7 with your best friend or the person you love the most in all the world who you still need a break from. But this is handcuffing you to a complete stranger.
Yeah.
And one thing I think about is how young these people are, right? We're talking about 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds whose prefrontal cortex will not finish developing for another half decade. So we are talking about people who do not have the emotional regulation that they'll eventually um, have come probably with their own unhealed, traumas and wounds. And so, making it inescapable in a companion system, which is framed as like support and safety, but, you know, actually is just a rule structure that I think can make a difficult situation practically impossible. And every former missionary you will talk to will tell you the difficulties of living with somebody, a stranger who might be in their own mental health crisis, for example, and
Right.
you are not equipped to deal with it, and you don't know what to do,
And
and you
probably
might,
having your own.
right, it-
Right? So
quite likely create genuine closeness, like lifelong friends, I'm sure. My mum has talked about mission companions who she had lifelong friendships with, even though they lived in other countries, so it was basically exchanging Christmas cards. Who knows whether they actually had compatible personalities. But you've got these months of forced intimacy, and you also are responsible for monitoring each other's obedience and turning each other in
yeah,
if one of you breaks the rules.
so creepy.
Right? So it's like you've got a lack of privacy and surveillance held together by a rule structure that, as you're talking, Jess, I'm realizing is hyper specific and also constantly shifting.
Right.
Okay. So we will dedicate a whole future episode to this case because I think the culture around it deserves so much unpacking. But I will tell you in a nutshell, uh, an extreme example of what can happen in a case like this. Okay, so we're going to go to December 1976, Harrisburg, Southern Illinois, where 24-year-old Elder James E. Christensen from Utah was serving in the Kentucky Louisville Mission. A decade earlier, he had experienced an accident where there was like a train car collision. I'm not sure whether maybe he was in the car, I'm guessing. Regardless, he had been left with permanent brain injury. He had partial paralysis, a severe limp, some slurred speech, but he really wanted to serve a mission. Now, a relative of his shared that local leaders had urged him not to serve, suggesting that he just serve a service mission at home instead. But he insisted he really wanted to do a full-time proselyting mission. And so he did. And he was paired with 20-year-old Elder Douglas, and this is going to be a Dutch name because it's spelled BJELDE, Bajil? I don't know. Literally don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to look that
So
up.
let's call him Elder B. That
Sounds
seems
good.
a bit too folksy and cute. I'll
Well,
call him
it's better than Elder BJ.
Maybe. Maybe. Okay, we'll call him Elder Doug. His first name is Douglas. Okay, so Elder Doug and Elder James Christensen. Okay, so he is paired with Elder Doug, this hard driving, obedience obsessed missionary from Wisconsin, clearly coming with his own issues, his own set of issues. He prizes numbers and relentless tracting. So over the course of their companionship, Elder Doug becomes really frustrated with Elder James Christensen's limitations. And those frustrations turned violent. with regular belt whippings and other abuse. And
Oh,
then
God.
on December 30th, the night of December 30th into the 31st, the violence exploded, and Elder Doug forced Christensen into a bathtub of scalding water, held him down for minutes, causing horrific burns,
Holy shit.
beat him with his fists and a belt until he fell, struck his head, and an old aneurysm burst. He lingered in agony for 3 days before he died on January 3rd, 1977.
Oh,
R.I.P. Elder James E. Christensen.
gosh.
I'm
R.I.P.
so
Wow.
sorry for this experience. Elder Doug drove his dying companion, to the hospital himself, initially lying about how he got his injuries. He was charged with 3 counts of murder and aggravated battery, and he was convicted in July 1977, so 6 months after the death, of voluntary manslaughter and aggravated battery, after a defense psychiatrist labeled him a chronic schizophrenic who could not control his impatience with Christensen's lack of missionary zeal. Okay, so he
Wait,
did get.
lack of missionary zeal?
Mhm.
Wha-
He couldn't help himself.
Whoa.
Yeah. So while he was found guilty, a judge gave him a 5-year probationary sentence and a $3,500 fine, no prison time. And he
No
returned
mental home
nothing. He returned home
facility?
to Wisconsin for outpatient treatment. Okay, which we'll follow up on the details of that in the episode that we will dedicate specifically to this. Will be dropping shortly. The church buried the incident.
Of course.
They listed him as deceased on the reunion rosters and issued no public statement. Now, Steve Benson, the grandson of the prophet Ezra Taft Benson and the nephew of Reed Benson, who was mission president at the time, has stated publicly online, all the sources for this will be in our Patreon, that he later overheard his own family privately blaming Elder Christensen, insisting that he was responsible for his own death because he had ignored priesthood counsel not to serve while he was physically impaired.
Oh
So in
my.
their view, his disobedience, going on a mission against local leaders' advice, made him the author of his own murder. So Steve Benson said he was stunned to hear his family members.
I'm stunned, and I don't have a lot of respect for Mormons, but that victim blaming? What the hell?
Exactly. He said there was this cold rationalization that rather than the church being held accountable for clearly this murderer was not equipped to be on a mission, should not
Oh,
have been there,
shit.
right? And then the killer not being held accountable. And Steve Benson said that he knows from his own family that Reed Benson was the mission president and he didn't go to the funeral. He sent his wife. The mission president's wife went to the funeral to kind of
Wow.
represent. Okay, so imagine the trauma for this family, right? The ongoing layers of trauma, because ultimately they're like, well, the fault is on your disabled elder son for deciding to serve at all. We'll do a whole episode on that because there's much more to unpack. It's wild. All right, so mission rules, as just mentioned, they don't stop necessarily with Preach My Gospel, because the mission president themselves, we talked about a particular mission president named Reed Benson, can add layers of hyper-specific expectations on, which might just be completely arbitrary and often are, the purpose of which is give a missionary a completely arbitrary rule, you're just merely testing his obedience. Right? So tell someone to do something stupid, like write with your left hand, and see if they will do it. So I
Wow.
cannot imagine how this sheer volume of rules and surveillance creates a world where your spiritual worth is feeling tied to your compliance, your obedience.
Yeah. Well, it is. And as you mentioned, like the rules often seem arbitrary and they can change based on the mission president's personal preferences. So, one mission president might allow missionaries to play basketball, but his replacement, no, bans all sports. And some missions are going to let their missionaries call home weekly, while others stick to the no, 2 times a year. Even as the rules may be based on personal preference or feel arbitrary, if you break them, then there are punishments or various punishments for that, which might include restricted activities, additional study requirements, or even being sent home early. So, serious rule violations might result in formal disciplinary action, and that affects the missionary standing in the church when they come home. This extensive rule system creates a culture of legalism where missionaries spend significant mental energy monitoring their compliance with detailed regulations rather than focusing on spiritual development or effective teaching.
And not just managing their own, other people's as well.
Right. So if you haven't gotten the point yet, mission culture uses pretty sophisticated emotional manipulation techniques, and they're really just disguised as spiritual training. Missionaries are taught that homesickness, depression, and anxiety, they're all just signs of spiritual weakness or lack of faith. They are encouraged to overcome any of those feelings through increased prayer, study, and obedience rather than addressing underlying emotional needs. So when you're crying yourself to sleep every night because you miss your family and you're exhausted from rejection and your companion won't start humming hymns every time you try to do something, they just tell you, "Hey, that's not depression, sweetie. That's Satan. He's just testing your faith." The cure isn't therapy or going home. It's more obedience. Work harder, pray longer, and if you're still sad, clearly you're not righteous enough. So, I know, Hannah, you've got a lot to say on this subject, but missionaries who struggle with mental health issues are often told that they're not working hard enough. As I mentioned, they're not faithful enough. They're not focused enough on their mission. They're just told, lose yourself in the service and trust that God will help you overcome these feelings. I think lose yourself in service is code for ignore every signal your body and brain are sending you that something is very wrong. It's really spiritual gaslighting, and you know how I shy away from that word, but it is at its
Mhm.
finest.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. I do wanna talk about missionary mental health, and maybe this deserves just a episode all of its own because
It
these are
may.
our
Yeah.
nutshell foundation episodes. You know, you created a culture where every detail of your life is regulated. Um, your emotions and struggles and questions and doubts are tied back to your obedience, and that's tied to your individual worth, and your the consequences are, cosmically monumental.
Mhm.
And so these kind of testing periods, designed I mean, the mission makes the man is something that just popped into my head. Did you ever hear that
Mhm. I
expression? Yeah,
did, yeah.
yeah, the mission makes the man. And when you were talking about Spencer W. Kimball, I remember was he the one who came up with every member a missionary? I'm not sure. I mean, that's
Oh
a little
gosh,
different.
yeah, we should look at I can't remember, but I remember hearing that as well. Yeah, it was
It was
kind of around the I'm a Mormon campaign, wasn't
it
it?
was like so the whole well, I grew up that was like the I'm a Woman campaign was after we had both left. And we both grew up hearing this. But the idea that it's this proving ground, like you said, just like it's like a boot camp, the mission makes the man, right? You're not a man unless you go just a spiritual child. So, my point is, you create an environment where you have these emotional peaks and valleys and crashes and um, you're homesick, you might be misinterpreting your normal emotional typical reactions to things as, the spirit signals. And so success then is measured in baptisms, essentially. I mean, almost everything in a missionary as life is quantified.
Yes.
And even though there is a narrative of it's not about how many baptisms you get because you might be planting a seed that you don't know, when it will come to fruition. But
Mhm.
that's said to make people not feel have suicidal ideation when they're just like been working for 2 years straight and they haven't baptized a single person, and they just think, what was that all for? And that's just designed to keep you gassed up and keep you going. So, it's just so much demand, tethered to your self-worth, right? And these weekly numbers become a pressure to baptize.
Yes.
And I want to talk really quickly. Again, this is a nutshell episode. So if mission success is quantified by lessons taught, how many, what do they call them? Investigators. God,
Yes.
how many
Investigator.
investigators you bring to church, and then especially baptisms, then every week I think you report these numbers. They go up to your district leader, which goes to your zone leader, or vice versa. Zone to district goes up to the mission president, and then the mission president must report them to Salt Lake. So your whole spiritual value is going to rise and fall with these statistics. Don't forget. And when your spiritual worth is tied to someone else's religious decision making, how much do you want to control other people?
100%. You wanna
Right? Like,
confirm
you're
100%.
working hard and you've got these eternal consequences. You're letting God down. And then you're getting highly perplexed with people who don't want to listen to you. So
Mhm.
one historic example is what is called baseball baptisms or basketball baptisms in the church. It was practiced all over the world, more in some places than others. So I'll talk specifically about Scotland and the UK in the 70s, 80s, even going on into the 90s. So, but this happened in Spanish-speaking parts of the US, like Arizona and California. It happened in all parts of South America. It happened in Japan. Essentially, missionaries would create baseball teams and basketball teams to attract local youth to want to participate in these recreational sports. We're
I
creating
hadn't
a
heard
rec
that.
team. We're going to teach these young kids in the UK how to play baseball. The church had their own baseball team, stocked with missionaries. And so missionaries would run these baseball games or basketball games to get the kids in the door and then baptize them with essentially no teaching, no understanding, no parental consent,
What?
often. I mean, can you imagine the hue and cry where it was like these parents sent their kids to their local Sunday school, and the missionaries basically had a minivan ready to, section them away. And so the parents were like, when we send our kids to church, we think we know which church they're going to, and you just took them to your church.
And baptized them.
Yes.
That's a holy sacrament for most religions. I am
Okay. Unless you
astounded.
think this didn't happen or we're exaggerating, there's so many receipts, and we'll put them in our resources. But I
Yeah.
just want to say, so again, this wasn't unique to Scotland, but because I grew up in the UK, I observed the practice of missionaries essentially tracting psychiatric hospitals. So,
Wait, what? Say that again.
so I grew up in a ward in England where missionaries would track the local psychiatric hospital and use those patients for baptisms. And guess what? On ex-Mormon Reddit, there are missionaries from the mission who name this hospital specifically.
Holy
They
shit.
So I was like, okay, they came with the receipts.
Wow.
So
Why am I surprised? I don't know why I am, but I'm sitting here just like
yeah,
stunned. I am
so I was in the England London mission.
wow.
And so the idea at the time, I remember noticing that these converts would come and never come back, right? They were these ghost members after baptisms. If you get on ex-Mormon Reddit, there are threads dedicated just to this mission. And there are also like ex-Mormon Facebook groups where people talk much more freely about it. So because they named the hospital. This was someone who said they were there in 1991. I'm just seeing. They said, okay, yes. They were bused to hospital twice weekly with their companion, where they would do rushed lessons. They targeted what this elder called low-hanging fruit, patients who are medicated, lonely,
Whoa.
seeking any social interaction. This elder said, our zone leader said, if they nod and say yes, just dunk them. So they also talked about the fact that one time there was 19 baptisms in one weekend. This was in 1991.
Oh, they're putting those numbers on the board, man.
Yes. And obviously mission presidents had been incentivizing missionaries to get these numbers with things like pizza parties. I mean, like in elementary
Woohoo,
school.
pizza! Yeah.
And then essentially bishops and stake presidents started complaining to mission presidents that your missionaries are just baptizing a bunch of ghosts and we've never seen them again. They don't understand the gospel. I
We're
mean, I
not getting any
remember,
tithing out of them.
well, that ain't that the truth. So no wonder the roster was growing so much. I mean, I remember in that time period, in that ward, talking to someone who had recently been baptized, and he had not been told that about the word of wisdom because they weren't giving the lessons. It was one or two. And so he was like, give up tea and coffee. No
No,
one told me
thank
about
you.
that. Yeah, exactly. No thanks. I'm out. And so then it became more standardized where it was like, you have to do these 6 discussions. You have to go to church at least twice. They became a minimum criteria to me. But that's what happens when you tie your spiritual worth and salvation to statistics.
100%. I mean, I didn't know about the baseball or basketball baptisms or the attracting patients from a psychiatric hospital. I mean, I'd heard stories about missionaries baptizing people who then show up, drunk to church or who don't speak English well enough to understand what they're agreeing to. But I hadn't heard those stories. I mean, that's astounding, and it's all the pressure to get the numbers up so that you can go at zone conference and be the best, like have the highest number of baptisms. And what happens though is that many people who are baptized in in this style, or because they were rushed to baptism so quickly, like of course they become really inactive right after or shortly thereafter. And so that creates this ongoing disappointment for the missionary, right? They have this intense pressure, they get people baptized, and it's not like a, you know, abracadabra, I'm an instant temple going, worthy member. It's you pulled somebody off the street, give him a couple lessons, and then rushed them to the baptismal font. It's ridiculous. But I really think that in the long run, what these missionaries are learning is to prioritize short-term success, over anybody's, including their own, like meaningful spiritual development.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk about, because this is like kind of there's a personal element to this for me in terms of like missionary communication and staying in touch with your family. So when my dad was on his mission, his mom died, and he was told by his mission president that he couldn't go home. He couldn't go home and see her body before burial. He couldn't be there for any of it. He couldn't even reach
Mm-hmm.
out and talk to his dad or his sisters or his brother, because that would take his focus away from the gospel and his work and his mission. And I can tell you that caused lifelong issues for my dad in his marriage, with his family, with his kids. And this control around missionary communication is insane. And it could mean that traditionally that missionaries could only write letters home like once a week. And as I mentioned earlier, they can only call home twice a year. And those were designated days too, on Christmas and on Mother's Day. In recent years, like the church has allowed more frequent communication, and you can do that through email or video calls, but it is still limited and it's monitored. When I say monitored, I mean that your mission president might literally read your emails, or your companion might be sitting there right next to you, listening to every word of your phone call home. So there's no privacy. There's no space that you can say, Mom, I'm really not okay.
I hate my companion.
Yes, I know. It's just like, we all just should understand that pretty much that's the norm. No, it's worth noting that these restrictions weren't loosened because the church had a change of heart or realized that they were, jeopardizing the emotional well-being, and mental health of their missionaries. No, it was because they were losing missionaries. So in February of 2019, after years of missionaries leaving early or really struggling with mental health, the church finally announced that missionaries could communicate with family by text or phone or video chat in addition to their weekly
Mm.
emails.
And
As
you
is the norm, this wasn't revelation, was it, Hannah?
please.
No. It wasn't inspired leadership finally recognizing that maybe completely isolating young adults from their support systems was harmful.
Mhm.
It was just damage control, per usual, right? Too many missionaries are having breakdowns, they're going home early, or they're really struggling to adjust into this life. So the church makes the tiniest concession possible while still maintaining the isolation that makes missionaries dependent on the mission system. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, oh, rule or no rule, there are so many people I know, even true believers, who would say, "I'm sending my kid with a phone. Try and stop me."
Yeah. Good for
Right?
them.
Who would just say, I mean, you think Lisa Barlow sent Jack on his mission without a way to communicate with her? I don't think so. Jess doesn't watch Real Housewives. We're
I
gonna get
don't.
her into it, okay? Right now, this means nothing.
Yes, future episode,
Yes.
or episodes.
I'm just saying, Lisa Barlow as a missionary mom is a whole other conversation. Yeah, I'm imagining that, people were like, "Yeah, no, my kid's struggling and, they will be having a phone."
They'll
And so
have a
there were
phone.
already so many rule-breaking missionaries, right? Because you weren't allowed
Yeah.
to have these communication devices, like prison. Um, and so it was sort of a case of like, "Okay, you can do what you're doing anyway."
Right. Well, and rule breaking or not, the culture is you're discouraged from sharing struggles,
Yeah,
doubts, or any negative experience with folks back home. You're taught that you focus on the positive experiences, you focus on spiritual growth. Do not complain about how hard it is. Don't tell people that you're homesick. And so what that means is you learn really fast that appearances are what's most important. So you have a sanitized
mhm,
version of what your experience. Like, "Oh, mom, the work is great. We taught 7 discussions this week. The food is
right.
super interesting." Meanwhile, you're arguing with your companion
You're crying
at
yourself to sleep.
at Whole Foods over what kind of milk your mom buys and what kind of milk you should get. You're eating nothing but, like, white rice and tuna fish, and your companion hates you. You're pretty sure you've got dysentery from the street food or something, and
Yeah.
you haven't slept for more than 4 hours that week. But, hey, the work is great.
One of my siblings went to a very, very cold country on his mission, and talk about positive framing. He would write home, and I remember he said, "Uh, the weather here is well. I get home and I step into the freezer to warm myself up." It's like you can really frame anything positively if you're trying hard enough,
You can, apparently.
right? I mean, conversely, family members and people writing to missionaries are also told, keep it uplifting, keep it light. I know people who got divorced while their kids were on a mission and they didn't tell the children until they got home because that would be, terrible to. Okay, I only know one family that did that, but
But still, that one family
it
thought
was
that
enough,
was okay. It's
right?
insane.
Right, because it's like you're so have this such strict control
Mhm.
over what you can say to your own family members, functioning as just a buffer that actually keeps families from seeing the full reality of what both of their lives are like on both sides. So both mission life and what's happening at home. So you're encouraged to, filter out. And like you said, Jess, what does that create? It creates a mindset, creates a culture that is just minutely adhered to the appearance of things and focused on that. Now, like, I cannot believe that it is a coincidence that young people are sent at an age. I always talk about the developing brain. I'm sorry, it's that school counselor and me coming out, right? That at a time where you are going through your own identity formation. So this is why marketers and advertisers know that the ideal, the person you want most is the freshman college student.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get someone when they've moved away from home, so all their parents' influence is still there, but they're also now making their own decisions. And basically what laundry detergent you can get someone to buy in their freshman year of college, you could probably get them to buy for the rest of their life. So it is this time of identity development. Eric
Yeah.
Erickson knew it.
Mm-hmm.
The church knows it. It is not a coincidence. So I really think, sibling relationships, you leave at 18, 19, the exact moment that your brain is wiring for final adult circuits, intimacy and trust and clarity and critical thinking skills that you haven't yet developed. And then over the next 100 odd weeks, you are going to be deliberately cut off from every relationship that used to
Yeah.
define you. No dating, no best friend phone calls, no late night talks with your little sister, no crying on your mum's shoulder when everything feels impossible. Like you said, Jess, letters are censored, emails are monitored. I mean, I can't quite say letters are censored because it's internal censoring. It's not a prison
Right.
system where someone's reading it. It's a
Mm-hmm. And
very
redacting portions. Yeah.
right. Yes, it's very it's self-censored, which is really the worst kind. Your one weekly home call which is 50, times more than you used to get, is timed. And the idea is if you miss home, you must be a lousy missionary. So the people you've known your whole life become distractions. And when you're gone, life at home does not pause. Your
Nope.
siblings hit puberty.
Mm-hmm.
They get their first heartbreak. They pick which college they want to go to or which major. They decide what they want to do for their career. They come out. They start believing. They start drinking. Whatever seismic shifts teenagers are doing, they're there without you as a witness. And I know from my own experience of moving to the States as a teenager, a late teenager, 18, and coming back, and that too was a response to trauma. So your parents are aging, people get married, there's all this strain, and basically 2 years go by, and when you step off the plane, the relationships that you had then are frozen, I want to say. I mean, they're just not fulfilled. Most missionaries that I know who have returned, well, they've all returned, eventually, described this disappointment or devastation. I don't know if devastation is too strong a word. It's like you don't just slot back into your life. Your
No.
little brother who used to follow you everywhere and try and hug you now just like has friends you've never even met and inside jokes that mean nothing to you. Your parents probably treat you like some kind of golden apostle. I mean, there's another harm that's done.
Yeah, agreed.
The mentality of coming home and thinking that you have answers, and you start telling your siblings how to like raise their children, just speaking from experience, where it's like, who are you? You don't even know me, and you don't know this kid that you've just met, but you're going to tell me how to parent it. So it does not strengthen family relationships. The
No,
exact moments that you are becoming adults, those family ties are becoming weakened and strained and dissipating.
they are.
So disappointing. okay, for a young man completing a mission is, like we said, it shapes your prospects, who's going to marry you. If you're at BYU, well, I mean, not just at BYU, but the idea is you're looking for an RM, you're looking for a returned missionary. And if somebody doesn't fit that prerequisite, then they might just be automatically considered not marriage material.
Yep.
So that would really add the pressure to go if you're thinking that your choice of mate, unless you go, is going to be really limited. So even if you don't really want to go, even if you're ambivalent or unprepared or having doubts, you know that if you're not an RM, it's just going to be more culturally difficult for you moving through Mormon social life.
Yeah, no, it's true. Young women, me included, and all of my sisters were counseled, to only date returned missionaries. And so you know, it does create this like permanent part of someone's social standing in the church, but also in their social circles to have that RM. Returned
Right.
missionaries, they're more likely to be dateable, yes, but they're called to be, in leadership positions in the church. They are seen, despite their young age, as spiritual authorities. And they learn that they're going to have their opinions respected on religious matters, which still kind of cracks me up a little bit. But so this creates that intense pressure that we've described to serve on a mission, even if you have doubts, even if you know you're not emotionally or mentally prepared for this, like because the social consequences of not serving can affect your entire life trajectory in Mormon culture. So, and interestingly, like the returned missionary status also creates hierarchies among returned missionaries. So, if you served in a prestigious, like foreign mission, or learned a difficult language, or you had really high baptism rates, then you're going to have higher status than the guys that served in Los Angeles, right? Or who really struggled in their missions. The intensity that the church lays on these young people just gets worse and worse. In 2012, Thomas S. Monson announced that the mission age would drop from 18 or from 19 to 18 for young men and from 21 to 19 for young women. And the response from members was immediate and it was overwhelming. Literally within hours, teenage girls were lining up outside bishops' offices to talk about going on a mission. And the church saw missionary applications surge 471% within days. So within a year, the total number of missionaries jumped from 58,000 to 83,000. And the church had to create 58 new missions just to accommodate the flood of missionaries. That really speaks to, and I think underscores, like how important and how meaningful having that RM after your name is in modern Mormon culture, whether you're male or female. Because we saw at the same time period the number of sister missionaries explode from about 8,000 to nearly 22,000 in 1 year.
Yeah, it used
So
to be culturally understood that you, as a woman, would go on a mission if you hadn't found someone to marry you by a certain age,
yeah.
right? If you had not
Mhm.
found your partner, I shouldn't say someone to marry you, found someone you want to marry, and who wants to marry you back. There, that's egalitarian, not like the church at all. So the idea was that you would only go as a woman if marriage wasn't an option. If somebody had proposed to you, you wouldn't say to them, "I'd love to when I get back from my mission." That would be wrong.
Right.
You would get married. Whereas if a man was engaged, he would go on his mission and then get married afterwards. So that's the cultural gender split.
Yeah. And I mean, it definitely applied to my sister. She got the same side eye, over like, are you going to serve on a mission? And so she did, and had this, so much of what we've discussed. Like when she had that realization, like I'm not doing well emotionally, it was you can't come home. No, you can't come home early, and that was both from my parents, but also from the mission president and the people who were supposedly there to support her.
Trauma.
And like her and like others, Hannah described mostly not murder as the trauma you're experiencing, but a lot of missionaries experience significant trauma during their service that is never acknowledged or addressed by the church. And so the combination of isolation and strict rules and constant rejection, the emotional manipulation and the culture shock can create lasting psychological effects. And we know this because missionaries often return home with depression, anxiety, even PTSD. And there are lots of other mental health issues that are attributed to the difficulty of readjusting to normal life rather than recognized as effects of mission trauma.
Yeah. Talking about mission trauma is much more acceptable than it used to be. I feel that it was incredibly taboo to talk about the difficulties that you faced on a mission. But as a society, as we have become so much more aware of the realities that these young people are clearly experiencing depression, anxiety, PTSD, spiritual disconnection, everything that comes with everyday struggles. Um, thank goodness, whether the church is addressing it itself or not, members are, post members are. People are talking about the reality. Former missionaries are talking about um, the reality of not these wholesome, friendly teenagers politely knocking on doors, but no, no, no. You take a bunch of stressed out, anxious, unhealed, uh, late teenagers and put them under constant surveillance and then tell them that they're going to be a spiritual authority. And it's sort of chaos making. And also, you also see a lot of missionaries behaving really badly. Um, and I do have a episode planned on missionary misconduct. I do think a lot of missionary misconduct is not malicious. It's just the human, consequence of this, environment that was created. How could you expect really other behavior when you put everything else in context? I mean, you would hope and expect that people would not behave so culturally inappropriately, but then imagine you stripped away all somebody's normal support systems, replace them with, these quotas and just pray about it.
Mhm.
And then it makes sense that the wheels come off. Um, and I think mental health crises, even mania, I think in missions can get treated like zeal, right? We talked about the idea of not having enough missionary zeal. If you are determined to follow every rule and do everything that is required of you, it
Yeah.
could very well lead to burnout. Um, for people who lose faith when they come home, some of them experience tremendous guilt for having gone and converted people. And now they, are wrestling with, first of all, they had the pressure to baptize, the manipulation of that, and now an understanding that they were promoting a really harmful system. And that's
Mhm.
what we want to unpack. And also, you get to pay for it yourself
Oh
while
my
you're doing it.
God. Yes, paying for it, the costs of missions or the financial costs. I mean, we've done a great job, I think, stepping through the emotional and psychological costs, but the financial costs of missions are huge.
Yeah, I mean, have you done the math? I am not sure. The latest figure I looked at was the cost itself is going to depend on where you go, and then families make a contribution.
Mhm.
What is your understanding?
So, yeah, my understanding last I looked, and again, I'm sure listeners can correct us if there are more accurate numbers, but the range was 12 to $15,000 for 24 months plus costs for clothing, supplies, for travel. So this financial burden falls on the missionaries' families. And for a lot of families, that's pretty stressful because not every Mormon is wealthy and can afford these extra cash outlays. But the church teaches you that families should prioritize mission costs over other expenses, including education expenses, your retirement planning, or paying down debt. And I know this firsthand. My parents were going to borrow from my uncle to help send my brother on his mission. So families often go into debt to fund their kids' mission. So they view it as like a really necessary sacrifice for their spiritual development. And think about it, if you have lots of kids who have to serve missions, which most Mormons have lots of kids, if we're sticking with that 15,000 for 24 months, disregarding all the other expenses, like a family with 4 kids serving missions is going to fund nearly $60,000 in mission costs over several years.
Mm.
And that is a huge financial challenge for most families. Now, the church has a fund to help families who can't afford mission costs, but accessing this money requires demonstrating financial need to your local leaders, which I mean, come on, that's embarrassing and it's stigmatizing. So you have the humbling experience of explaining to Brother Thompson, who owns 3 car dealerships, that your family can't afford to send you to Salvador to sell Mormonism door to door for 2 years, right? And Brother Thompson gets to decide if you're poor enough to deserve help, or if maybe your family should just sell a second car or skip a few dental appointments.
Mhm.
So we're really just means
Sacrifice a
testing
bit more.
salvation in this system, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I just wanna clarify, when I said it would depend the cost would depend on where you went,
Mhm.
I I immediately thought, and something you said, but I think it deserves clarification, is that, yeah, the family would pay the literal cost would change, but the family is not penalized for if their kid gets sent to a much more expensive. If you go to Vienna, where the cost of living is really high, versus, like, Honduras, you don't pay more. The church evens it out, but each family is supposed to make this sort of blanket, like,
Yeah,
contribution, is my understanding.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, but there can still be inequity among missionaries, right? Because you can have a wealthy family who can send you with better clothing, better supplies, right? And you're going to stand out from those families that have fewer means to do that. And we talked about mission presidents, earlier, and how their rules can feel arbitrary or really like personal, like based on their personal biases. But I think we should talk a little bit more about how much authority these men have over a missionary's daily life and their spiritual development and even like their future prospects. So, a mission president can extend or shorten your mission. He can send you home early. He assigns you, as I mentioned, that your companions and where, the areas within the region that you're in, you're going to go and proselytize. And he'll make decisions that affect your life for years to come. So who is this guy? Like the mission president? Well, he's typically a successful businessman who's called to serve for 3 years with their wife. So, like many other callings, or almost I would say every other calling in the church, a mission president receives minimal training for their role, and they're expected to provide spiritual guidance, administrative oversight, and pastoral care for, anywhere from 100 to 200 young missionaries. So basically, we're talking about some dude who made millions selling insurance or running a car dealership, like I said, and you give him a weekend of training and then you put him in charge of the mental health, the spiritual well being, the daily decisions of 200 teenagers who were, well, late teenagers or early 20 somethings in a foreign country. Not sure what could possibly go wrong there. So, because when you have zero counseling training, zero cultural competency training, and zero accountability, but
Mm.
can send a young man home in disgrace or tell him that you're extending his mission without his consent because you're called of God, everyone is supposed to just accept it and never question your authority.
I can't help but think, as I grew up in a country where these Americans would come and tell us that the US was the promised land and that they were God's chosen people, and that, you know, they had this American exceptionalism, manifest destiny written large, and it would be like, yeah, but God said. So what are you going to argue with him? I don't think so.
Well, it's
So
not just Mormons that think that, but
right, you
it's
throw in
all
some religious,
Americans. Yeah.
expectations and exceptionalisms, and it's like missionaries aren't just teaching theology; they are really introducing, um, like they're the ambassadors, I guess, of like these behavioral norms and worship styles and ways of being, as if they're universal and should just be universally taken up. So converts in other parts of the world where these are not like normal traditional cultural norms or practices might find themselves in, you know, a position of tension between
Mhm.
their own cultural context and what is being offered to them. There's a wealth gap often,
Yeah.
as you pointed out, which could create resentment or confusion because the world over, or unrealistic expectations. If this looks like an incredibly wealthy church, but the local church membership who are giving 10%, right, to the church, but they're not getting anything back at all
Right.
in proportion.
Well,
Um,
salvation, they're getting salvation. Sorry.
you know what? When you put it like that, it's a small price to pay. Um, So, speaking of cultural incompetence, there are famous examples of US missionaries. There was an example from 1972 in Thailand where the elders actually served prison time for defacing a centuries old Buddhist statue. They draped like a white sheet or a
Wow.
shirt over it to make it look like a missionary, and then snapped a photo of themselves like all over it, this national monument, desecrating it. So it was like this UNESCO site. A monk caught them. I mean, said like they were obviously being insulting, uh, or um, what's the nicest spin that you could put on it? Ignorant, thoughtless. Um, anyway, they did spend 6 months in a Bangkok prison
Ooh.
before the Thai king personally pardoned them and deported them. And the church said it was just a matter of youthful stupidity. And of course,
Oh.
there were no consequences.
Mhm.
There was
Yeah.
another incident in South Korea where 4 American elders in the Seoul mission climbed onto a 1,000-year-old Buddhist statue. Same shenanigans. Um, Staged a mock baptism with a water bottle, and once again, same stunt, same kind of prop, same punchline, um, same locals horrified at the,
Yeah.
you know, US Americans just coming in and acting like such fucking twats.
Yeah, it sounds like there's more, I mean, more to be embarrassed about to being an American, but you know, they're converting people to American style Mormonism rather than paying attention to any kind of indigenous forms of Christianity or cultural norms um or even just reading the room, unfortunately, but I think that's kind of par for the course with young men and young women at this age, right? Because as you mentioned and we talked through already, but I think it's relevant here too. Like the mission experience is occurring during really crucial years of identity development. And it's gonna have lasting effects, not just not just on the people that you impact while you were there, but on your own personality, on your relationships, and your life choices,
Mhm,
right? I've seen many returned missionaries struggle to develop independent decision-making skills because they've had 2 years of their lives they're in a very formative time period where they all they could do was follow really detailed rules and pledge allegiance and be obedient to external authority, right? So the mission can interrupt your normal social and emotional development. I
mhm.
mean, and
Yeah.
particularly around romantic relationships and even like career planning, because you are behind your peers. You feel behind them and you are behind them because they've been going to school and college, or they've been working, or they've been dating and developing other skills and relationships. And so here you are, not able to slide right back into your life as you knew it. You're out of step and you're behind.
Yeah. Exactly. If you, as you said, take out all the implications about what
Mhm.
missions do to others, right? And just look at the impact on the individual themselves. And when you zoom out and say, this is more than a 2-year service assignment, right? This is an experience that is going to rewire people during these formative years, um, when you're figuring out who you are and experimenting, and it will impact, as you said, every decision you make hereafter, how you struggle with your autonomy, your self-trust, building relationships. This is all going to be so directly impacted by these formative experiences. Some people will walk away with real skills
Mhm.
and meaningful memories and great relationships. But for so many, there's this psychological consequence, cost that takes years, I think, to recognize and then name and address and acknowledge and then heal.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
I agree. And so, while maybe this wasn't in a nutshell, we had a lot to talk about. You do have it, right? Mormon mission culture. It's a system that takes young adults at a crucial developmental stage and subjects them to rigid control, emotional manipulation, and intense pressure to convert strangers to their religion. Next time, we'll explore Mormon folklore, the urban legends, supernatural stories, and folk beliefs that circulate in Mormon culture alongside official doctrine. We'll talk
I
about the
can't
three
wait.
Nephites, Cain as Bigfoot, missionary miracle stories, and the blurry line between doctrine and folklore.
Right. It's gonna be good.
It is.
Um, these stories are like mother's milk to me, and I absolutely devoured them growing up. Okay, so until next time, remember, if a teenager in a name tag tells you they have the only complete truth on earth and that you should listen to them and stop doing what you're doing and doing it their way, you are allowed to say, no, thank you.
Yeah, 100%. So thank you for listening. And before we go, massive thanks to Hannah W. for our incredible theme song, Dr. Dave for guitar, and Mick for making our music sound professional. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow along on TikTok and Instagram at Postmormon Postmortem. And if this resonated with you, consider supporting us on Patreon at Postmormon Postmortem. Until next time, Eternal Family.
Hey, Jess,
Yeah,
I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.
me too. I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.
Later, Eternal Family.